do, I'll turn on the recording now, and I will share my screen. Alrighty, so we're going to be doing a Kahoot to start with, just to sort of get a little bit of revision in. So if you don't know how this works, please join on your phone, go to kahoot.it and type in the game pin. If you're in my class this term, you may have already done this Kahoot. I've added a few extra questions, but the idea is just to sort of go through the basics of strings again. If there's anything that we're all really confused about, we can definitely go and check that out. But otherwise, we'll start off with this. Strings. Wow, we've got some very bin-themed names. Wrong answer. These are some good names. Oh. I'll have to not access this. 10 people. We've got 17 people in the call, so I might wait until we get to 13 or 14 people, maybe. Is there volume? Unfortunately not, because it's going through my headphones. Hold on. What I'll do is this. There you go. There's your Kahoot sounds. And no more Kahoot sounds because I need to wear my headphones so I can hear things. All right, 18 people in the call, 13 people. We'll give it another 10 seconds. You can always join halfway through, so don't worry if you don't quite get it on time, but we'll take it in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Nice try. Alrighty, fun with strings. If you've just joined us, feel free to use the link or use the code in the bottom left-hand corner once we look at our question. Oh, bottom right-hand corner. So, true or false? A string is an array. Alrighty, so most people say it's true, and I agree with them. Now, not all arrays are strings, but all strings are arrays. So one of those interesting mathsy sort of subset problems. So a string is a sequence of characters, much like an array is a sequence of numbers. Now, there's one other thing that's important about a string. I think that's what our next question is going to cover. So we'll get to that now. Congratulations to Trash and Printf Hi. Well done. What is at the end of a string? One might even ask, how long is a piece of string? Alrighty, and most people got this one. So it's definitely not a pot of gold, and it's also not a normal array. The important thing about a string is that strings end with a null terminator. We often write that as quote \0 quote. And that's how we know that we're at the end of the string. It's really important that we have that, because if we didn't have that, we'd need to keep reminding ourselves how long the string is. You need to say this is a 5-length string. Whereas with this way of doing things, all you need to say is here's the start of the string. Once you get up to a \0, you know you're at the end. So it's not quite a null pointer. A null pointer is a slightly different thing. And I know they're named the same, but it's useful to have a distinction between null, the word, which is for a pointer, and a null terminator, which is more about characters. Alrighty, how are we going? Trash still in first place. Nice work. What type does getchar return? This is a tricky one. Alrighty. Ooh, this one is a little bit harder because it's called getchar. You'd think it returns a char, but it doesn't. It returns an int. Why is it important that it returns an int? Post in chat if you have a good idea as to why is it so important that getchar returns an integer. Give people a second to post in chat. Yeah, so it returns the ASCII value if it's got a value, but as Patrick says, it needs the integer range because it needs to be able to return something other than a character if there's nothing to scan in. So if I press Control D or my input ends, getchar will return EOF. EOF is generally -1, so they're mostly interchangeable. I got into a big argument with one of the other tutors about this last night. So you probably should be saying not equal to EOF, but EOF and -1 in this course are pretty much the same thing. So getchar returns an integer because there are two options. It either could return any value of char because it could return a character, or it could return -1. So there are sort of 257 possible values it can return. 256 fit inside of a character. That would just be any regular character. And the 257th is -1 or EOF. Okay. To Mohan's question, would these questions be of similar style to the multis in the final exam? Not quite. Some of the later ones might be, but the questions that I'm asking here are more intended for revision, whereas the ones that we're asking in the exam will be slightly different in terms of they're more intended to assess you. So there might be things like, given a piece of code, what would this print, or what should fit in here? I'll give you a hint when we come across some that might be kind of like what's in the exam. Oof, printf high in first place. Well done. How do we specify EOF in a Linux terminal? Alrighty, most people got this one. It's Control D, absolutely right. Another question there, when will the assignment answers be released? Assignments, we don't release answers for them. There's no like sample code for the assignment. Your marks for assignment 1 should have all been released, and your marks for assignment 2 will start being processed probably on Thursday or Friday, but they take about a week for us to go through and mark everyone, and especially because all of your tutors are also students, we've also got exams that we're doing as well. So it'll take maybe a week or two before those go back to you. Does that answer your question, Vishak? And printf, hi, still in first place, nice work. Alrighty, what does the a2i function do? Right, most people got this one right. So it converts a string into an integer. Well done. It's not the other way around. Okay. Any questions about that one? Questions that ask what the program will print if we got time. It's a great question, Nadia. So this is a more of an exam question again, but I'll happily answer it. For the questions that ask what the program will print, if there's time to do it, can you just go and make a file yourselves? Absolutely, you can. So most of the questions, especially in the short answer questions, they'll either involve some code or there will be there'll be a piece of code that's given to you. Now, we try and order them so that they're kind of easier to harder, but that's not a guarantee. I mean, some might be easier and more difficult. Some of those questions, you might be able to get a mark for chucking it into DCC and seeing what happens. Other ones of those questions, we specifically designed them so it's harder to do that. So it really depends on what the question is, whether or not we'll be able to, whether or not you'll be able to do that. How much time should you spend on short answer? If you are going over half an hour, I mean, so thinking about the way that the exam works, 20% of the exam is short answer. So 3 hours intended for you, split that into 5 chunks. I think that's 40 minutes. No, a bit less. 35 minutes. So Look, what I'd say is if you're going over 30 minutes on that section, it might be good to go away and come back. But anywhere even up to 45 minutes might be appropriate, especially if you're sort of going to struggle with the other questions. You might find that you need that much time. But that's sort of a range I could give you. Anywhere from sort of 15 minutes to 45 minutes, depending on sort of how you're feeling. Cool. Ben, back in third place. Nice work. Quiz. Which of the following is a valid way to call Sturtol? It's a flashback. Blast from the past. You might remember this from week 7 or week 8, maybe. Alrighty. Most people got this one. Stir, null, 10. So stir is the string. It's always null as the second argument. And 10, we technically call that like a radix or a base. So we're saying it's a base 10 number. So if you wanted to pass a hexadecimal number, you could absolutely do that. You'd say 16 rather than 10. Okay. Hi, still place. Nice work. Which of the following is a valid way to call fgets? It's a great question. I'll answer it as soon as this quiz is done. Which of the following is a valid way to call fgets? Alrighty. A few more people didn't get this one. So this is, fgets is a string. 10 is a length, so it could be a constant, or it could be, in this case, I've just said it's 10 long. And then we always say std as the last argument because we're getting from standard input, i.e. from what the person types. To the question in chat, what's the second argument used for in Sturtol? The answer is if you provide it a, what is it? You provide it a char pointer, and what it will do is it'll it might be better if I do this in JS Paint. 1 minute. Okay, so imagine, for instance, that you've got my string here. So my string is like 2, 7, 27th. So here is a string that says 27th. When I call Sturtol, the first argument is a pointer to this. The second argument is actually a pointer. So what I'll draw that as is an arrow to a box that itself points with an arrow. It kind of looks like a linked list. This isn't a linked list, to be clear. This is just a pointer. And that, when you call Sturtol, is set to the first character that was not scanned in. So I know this is a bit weird, but what this is basically allowing you to do is to say, I'm trying to convert the string 27th into a number, into a number. And if, let's say, part of the string doesn't have a number, so if it's th, this second argument allows me to specify, or allows Sturtol to tell us where the string scanning stopped. So it's kind of like an error handling thing. It's also really useful for if you're scanning in multiple things at once, but it's not something we cover in the course. So the pointer aspect kind of makes it a bit difficult, so we don't really talk about it too much in the course. Okay? With that, I'll jump on to the next. Yes, exactly. In that case, it'll set it to the location of t. But more generally, it will just set it to the first non-numeric thing. Oh, trash back in first place. Nice work. Alrighty. Which of the following are arguments to int main? Pay attention. Be careful here. It might be trying to trick you. Alrighty, most people got this one right. Well done. So int argc char star argv open close. In other words, an integer, which is the number of arguments, the count of arguments, and a pointer to a character array. In other words, a pointer to a, well, effectively an array of strings is the way you can think about it, called argv, which is the argument vector or argument values, depends what you call it, but it's a list of the arguments. Alrighty. Oof, no changes on the leaderboard here. Nice work. Last question. Which of the following while loop conditions would iterate through each character? So if you imagine that this is inside a while loop and you've got a string char, and then you've got a square brackets being the, no, square brackets I into that string. Okay, most people got this one. So if it probably would have been better to call this chars rather than char, but this is a list of, this is an array of characters. We're accessing it via square brackets I and saying, well, it's not equal to \0. In other words, well, it's not equal to the null terminator. So as long as we're not at the end of the string, we're going to keep going through. Alrighty, let's see how people did. In third place, bad bar name. Nice work. Second place, printf hi. And in first place, trash. Nice work, everyone. Okay, are there any questions? Oh, well done to Brad and Ben as well. Any questions based on that so far? Anything that people want me to go over? Anything that's not sure about? Anything at all? Nope. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to write myself a program that's going to look at each of the ways that we can scan in a string. So that's first of all what we're going to do. And then if we've got time at the end, we might also look through how we deal with strings, how we do things with strings. Let me just stop sharing and reshare now. Alrighty. Yep, that's exactly what I'm about to do. It's a great idea, Vishak. Thank you. I like COMP1511. Now, I just have to run this command quickly. X, where is it? Xrender. That command just resets my terminal so it's the right size for my screen. You can ignore it. Where did it go? There it is. Alrighty, so we're going to jump into a folder called mcdir revision. We're going to cd into revision. Then we're going to get at this file, and we're going to call it something like string revision.c. Don't forget the ampersand. Include stdio.h. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this an int main, int argc char star argv. And the reason I'm doing this is because here's what I want my program to do. It's going to read the first argv, and if it says argv, print out every argument. If it says getchar, it's going to scan in and print out each letter we type. And if it says fgets, scan in a line and print out its length, let's say. Here are 3 different things that we can do, each of which is going to use a different type of way of getting a string in. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to read the first argv. So let's see how I do this. Surely what I can do is I can just say if argv0 equals argv. Okay. Does anyone have a problem with this statement? Or is this fine? Post in chat if there's something about this that you don't think is quite right. We should check argc. I agree with you. Okay. So let's have a look. The first thing we said was we should check argc. So I agree that we should almost certainly say if argc is less than 2, because there got to be 2 arguments, right? Then printf usage %s argv, or what are the other ones we could have? We might want to have getchar. We might want to have fgets. So here's a nice usage message. Now, one thing that I've done here, oh, and I'll also just print out argv0. Now, you're never going to need to do this in the exam, I doubt. You won't need to print out like a usage message, but it's certainly useful for us now to just remind the user if they don't type in the right thing, it'll tell them, hey, you accidentally forgot you meant to type in one of these things. And this is also a really common way that you might see someone specify their program's usage. So you'd say usage, %s, and then these 3 options, and then maybe some other stuff afterwards. Okay, now I said argv less than, or argc less than 2 here. And that's because, as some people have already pointed out, argv0 is the file name. And what that means is I've actually got to say argv1 here. So let's say that I called this program as /string revision argv. This thing here is going to be argv0. This thing here is going to be argv1. And so on and so forth. I might add a new thing. That'll be argv2. Alrighty, so that's a useful thing to realize. So we'll change this to argv1. And the other thing which Samuel said was you can't use equals equals with strings. Now, I agree with that. Now the issue with this is that what equals equals is asking is not about whether the strings have the same content. It's asking about whether they are actually the same string in memory. So some of you might know that strings are pointers. So what this is checking is, does the pointer argv1 point to the same place as the string argv1? And that's a different question. It might be that that's the case, but it probably actually isn't. It would be very coincidental if you actually had the same string, this string here, and argv1. So it's not that easy. It's comparing memory addresses. That's a technicality you don't really need to worry about too much right now, but it's why, for instance, this will work. Like this code will compile right now, but it's not very good code. We don't want to use this code because it's not going to do what we expect. Does that make sense, Mohan? Okay, so what should I do here instead of saying equals equals? Stir comp. Mohan suggests stir case comp, which is an even sort of nicer version of stir comp. Stir case comp will check whether it's case insensitive equal. So if I said argv in uppercase, but argv1 was all in lowercase, that'd be totally fine. What I'm going to do though, just because I'm really cool, is I could hash include string with h, but I'm going to define it myself, just because I'd like to have something that we've seen before. I'm going to define this a bit differently though. String equals char star stir 1, char star stir 2. And what this is going to return is if the 2 strings are equal, it'll return 1, otherwise it'll return 0. So currently it's saying, yep, the strings are always equal. Now, one of the things that I teach my class, and is a useful thing, is to always, when we're writing out something like a while loop, which we're probably going to need to do here because we've got 2 strings and we want to go through them, is to first of all write out the sort of 3 things that a while loop needs. So we need to have an int I, that's sort of to go through everything. We need to have a while loop. We're definitely going to need to say I++. Now inside this while loop condition, that's a bit harder. We've already spoken about during the revision Kahoot, we said we could say stir I not equal to \0. Great. But in this case, probably have to say stir 1i. And in fact, what I've got to do is I've got 2 strings here. So what should my while loop condition be? I'll give people a second to type it in chat. It's a little bit more complicated than this one. What should my while loop condition be here? And Bodhi says, oh, so we should also say and stir 2i is not equal to \0. That's really important, because otherwise what might happen is string 1 might be 1,000,000 characters long, but string 2 might only be 1 character long. And if we only went off this, then we'd keep going through string 1, and we'd run off the end of string 2. So let's have a look at what we do here. What we probably want to be checking, right, is we want to check, well, is string 1 equal to string 2? You might think, well, that's what we should check, right? Because what we'll do is we'll say, well, if these two are equal, I'm going to return 1. Now, this is a really common mistake I see. Can anyone tell me what's wrong with this piece of code? Post in chat. What's wrong with what I've done here? I'm only comparing the first element. So, and I mean, also you can probably notice, hey, there's only return 1s here. There's no way it can return 0. So the trick that we use here is I like to think of this operation kind of like a proof by negation. So we're going to start off assuming that the strings are equal. What we want to do is we want to say, actually, if we find a case where the strings aren't, where the letters aren't equal, then it's no longer going to be an equal string. So we kind of assume here, we say, well, let's assume that the two strings are equal. We go through looking for a counterexample. It might be that the first two letters don't match up, or it might be that the second two letters don't match up, or the third two letters don't match up. Okay. Is this piece of code good, or is there something else that I'm missing? I'll give people a second to think. But he's got a great point. We haven't actually checked that they both end with a \0 in the same place. So here, let's say that the two strings that we've got are ABC, great example, Samuel, and the other one is ABCD. Well, so these two here, they're equal. Okay, cool. These two, these are equal. These are equal. And now our while loop condition here says, oh, that's a \0. So we're going to stop, and we return 1. But because it's a \0 here, and there's a D here, they actually shouldn't be the same thing. So we'll add in an extra little check here, and we'll say, well, if stir1i is not equal to stir2i, then return 0, otherwise return 1. So it kind of looks like we've duplicated this up here and down here, but this has a different purpose. This one's job is to check the characters in the middle of the string, whereas this one's job is to only check the characters at the end of the string. Any questions about that? So now, if there aren't any questions, what I can do is I can say string equals 1. And this is going to check whether argv1 is equal to the string argv. Let me stop here and just check if there are any questions. One thing I like to do in my tutorials is do a rating out of 5. So if 1 out of 5 means I've got no clue what's going on, Tom, 5 out of 5 means I'm following perfectly, everything you say makes sense, really easy. Just fill in the poll about where you're feeling. So most people are around a 5, but there's a few people a bit less than that. That's okay. That's okay. So let's just go over that really quickly. We wrote ourselves a while loop to go through each character in the string. We said, well, if the two characters aren't equal, then clearly the strings aren't equal, so return 0. If we get to the end of one of the strings, make sure that we're at the end of both of the strings, because it might be that one of them is a \0 and the other one is a D or an X. Who knows? And if they're not equal, then return 0. Otherwise, return 1. Awesome. So we use string equals here. There's one word of caution that I've got. You're more than welcome to use stir comp if you would prefer. then you don't have to rewrite this code. But what's the trick about strcomp? Can anyone tell me what's different about strcomp than this string equals function here? Yes, that's the trick. Strcomp returns 0 if the two things are equal. You've got to be really careful about that, because what would happen is if you assume that string equals and strcomp work the same way, you might say equals equals 1. What that actually means is whether the last characters, well, effectively strcomp returns which string is later in the alphabet. So it returns 1, I think, if the second string it's given is after the first one. Otherwise, it returns a negative number if the second string is before the first string in the alphabet. And it returns 0 if they're the same place in the alphabet. So if you use strcomp and set equals equals 1, you're not quite going to get the result that you expect. So make sure that you're using either a string equals function you've written yourself, or that you say strcomp equals equals 0. Okay. Now we've read the first argv. What I'm going to do now is I might just outline the rest of my program. So if argv1 is getchar, we'll do that. And if, oh, actually I've messed up here. That should say, that should be argv. I might just, what I'll do here is I'll clean this up a little bit. Alrighty, so if that, and then here we'll say if this. Alrighty, and that will be fgets. Alrighty, so we'll go through each of these. If it says argv, we're going to print out every argument. What are we going to need to every argument given to us in this program? Post in chat. What do we need? Yeah, lots of things we'll need, so feel free to chuck out any ideas you've got. I agree, we'll definitely need a while loop. Absolutely right. So let's write that in. Int I equals 0 while something I plus plus. Absolutely right. So this dot 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 here, what I'm going to replace it with is I is less than argc. As Samuel said, nice work there. Oh, argc. So what we're doing here is we're counting from 0 to the number of arguments provided to our program. What we'll do with each one is we'll print out %d goes to %s, new line, and then %d will be I, and then we'll say argvi. Alrighty. So what we're going to do is we're going to save that. We might compile for the first time just to make sure that our code is actually working. Okay, first thing we note, our check for whether we've given it the proper arguments works. So we know for a fact that if we give it only /string revision without an extra argument, it'll throw an error. That's really useful. So let's now try it with argv. Cool. So argv0 is /string revision, and argv1 is argv. We can try this further. See here now that each of these words is given its own number. So argv is 1, a is 2, b is 3, c is 4, and so forth. And that's saying that in argv, a is at index 2. So argv square brackets 2 is the string a. It's worth noting that I can also do apple, blah, Charlie, let's say. And we're grouping by words. So each space in the string, that's going to split up into a different part of argv. Any questions about that so far? Or is that making sense? No questions? Let me do another poll maybe. Again, how are we feeling? 1 being totally lost, 5 being totally confident, really getting what you're saying, Tom. Where are we? Alrighty. Most people around a 4 or a 5. That's good. So if there's anybody in here who's less than 4, is there anything in particular that's getting lost or that's confusing? Post it. Feel free to post in chat if there's a particular question that you want me to answer. There's something that's not really making sense. I'm very happy to go through specific stuff. That's a good question. How does argv separate things into words? It's just automatic. That's just the way that the world works. You don't have to worry about it at all. Cool. I agree. Easy peasy. So when do we use argv? We really only use argv and argc when we're providing some input on the command line. So if you're saying string revision space argv, for instance, then you use argv. If, however, you're trying to run the program and then scan in input, we don't use argv. So argv only works at the time when you're starting up the program. Any questions about that or anything that's not clear about it? Generally, when we're using argv, it's pretty obvious that you're going to want to do that because we're going to say, you know, it'll be given blah, blah, blah as an argument, or as arguments it will be given. And that's a good hint. Oh, I need to use argv. No questions? Anything at all? Okay. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to mess around with getchar. Getchar is a little bit different. How many characters does getchar get at once? Any ideas? Only gets 1 character at a time. Absolutely right. And that's really important because it doesn't store anything for you, right? All it's doing is 1 single character. So there are some situations where that's useful, and there are some situations where that's not so useful. Let's take a look at one where it's useful. Here we're going to write ourselves another while loop, but this time what we're going to do is we're going to say int c equals getchar. And then we're going to printf %c has code %d. You probably saw this example a few weeks ago, so hopefully it's not too scary for you. But what this is going to do is it's going to say, hey, this character has this ASCII code. Can anyone tell me what an ASCII code is? I did just throw that word out there with no sort of context. So does anyone know what an ASCII code is? Oh, oops. Any ideas? What's ASCII? I'm asking someone, please, so I don't have to ask you again. Yeah, so there's this sort of mapping of, here's a number, 68, and that maps to uppercase D. Whereas 99, that maps to lowercase c. And so we can store letters as numbers. That's what this is saying. So if we compile string revision, we run string revision with now getchar. If I type in lowercase c, it tells me C has code 99, which is exactly what we've got here. And if you look at your code, what this is actually saying is I'm printing out C twice in 2 different ways. Once I'm printing it out as a character, and once I'm printing it out as a number. Any questions about that? Any questions at all? Nope. Oh, cool. Alrighty. So the next thing we're going to look at then is how can we do this multiple times? So here's one getchar, but one getchar's not very useful. I had a maths teacher once who I very much look up to, and he had this phrase which he stole from one of his maths teachers, and the phrase was, you know, if you do something once and it feels good, do it again. So we scanned in a variable once, it felt good, let's do it again. We're going to say int c, and now we're going to say while, we'll do this 2 different ways, maybe that might be useful. while c equals c equals getchar, while c is not equal to EOF, we're going to move this print statement. So there we go. Print this thing. Oh, and also c equals getchar. Now it's really essential here that we call c equals getchar inside the while loop. What would happen if I forgot to call c equals getchar inside that while loop? Can anyone tell me? Yeah, your loop would go forever and would print the exact same thing. So we definitely don't want to do that. That would be bad. So let's run this. Let's run this again. We'll recompile. And now I type in H. Oh, that's a bit weird. I type in 8. A bit weird. Okay, so let's have a little bit of a look into this. This is kind of interesting. First of all, it's an excellent point, Julia. Bit of a spoiler, but that's a good thing. Thank you. So it's weird that we were actually printing out two things at once. It looks weird at least, but it really isn't. Because what I typed here was H enter. So if I type H enter, what that's saying is H has code 104, and then here there's a blank line. It's almost as if there's a new line there, and it says has code 10. And then I type in 8, and it says 8 has code 56. But because I pressed 8 enter, again there's another new line there. Let's have a look at maybe what happens if I say hello. Well, now it says HELLO exclamation mark, and then again it still has this code 10 thing. So it's important to realize that \n is itself a character which you can scan in. Any questions about that? Anything doesn't make sense there? No? Everyone's happy with that? No, okay, awesome. So one of the things which is important to note about getchar is that getchar waits until you press enter to send all of your input off to the program. So weirdly enough, I could type HELLO exclamation mark, but I had to press enter before each of those characters got processed. Now, it doesn't make too much of a difference, but it's useful to know that because it means that you'll kind of understand why all this stuff happens at once, why it waits until I press H and then enter for it to print something out. Any questions about that so far, or is that all good? No? Okay. Is there a way to take input without waiting? That's a great question. You would need to change something about the settings of the terminal. So there is an option. I think it's something to do with set term something something. You'd need to look it up. Though if you Google it, I'm sure there'll be a way to do it, but you would need to Google it. Okay. Oh, actually, what the other thing I should have shown is if I type in ASDF, prints out all these codes. How do I stop my program? How would I stop my program at this point? Yeah, Control D. So Control D will stop it because while C is not equal to EOF, the next thing that getchar scans will be an EOF, and therefore it will stop. There's a great question there from Mohan, which is, would we change our while loop condition to C not equal to 10 to prevent the new line thing from? Good question. My answer to that is probably not, for a few reasons. First of all, because if you change it to C not equal to 10, it won't deal with an EOF. It'll just loop forever with an EOF. So if you want to do that, you'd probably have to say something like C not equal to EOF and C not equal to 10. But there's another problem with this. I should probably also make this an and, not an or. Because while it's both not EOF and not 10. Can anyone tell me what the other problem with this is? Oh, well, so definitely would stop the loop at the enter. I agree with you, but I agree with Samuel, which is this is kind of a magic number. What is 10? I mean, we both know that 10 is new line, but somebody else coming across your program might not. So we'd probably write it like this rather than any other way. That's definitely something we can do. Julia asks, oh, sorry, no, Lisa asks, why couldn't you do int c equals getchar? No reason I could do this. The reason why I actually did this was because what I was originally going to do was a shortcut. And what I might do is I'll show you this really quickly because it can come in handy. But if you're kind of not sure about this and you're a little bit confused, don't worry about this shortcut. What you can say is int c while c equals getchar not equal to -1. This is a bit crazy, a bit weird. But what this is saying is fetch a character and assign it to be equal to c. And then, by the way, once you're done, if it's not equal to -1, then keep going. Now, this is more advanced. It's got some weird implications because it's kind of like we've never seen an equal sign inside an expression before. We've never seen it, you can't compare an equal sign to this. And certainly, if you try this in some circumstances, you'll get a warning or an error. But here, sometimes it can be useful to do this. So I'll just mention that's a thing you can do. Any questions about that? Oh, and yes, you could absolutely say UF here. Any other questions about that? Is it okay for style? Yes, it is, as long as it's not too long, would be the main thing. Some tutors might not show it to you, but the reason I mention it is because it can be kind of useful to do things this way because you won't forget to do a getchar anywhere. Can we compare C to a character or an int? I'm not sure I understand your question fully. What do you mean by compare C to a character or an int? Give people a second. Yeah, so when you say C equal to something, so I'm saying here C equals getchar, which is a bit weird. That's something which we only really can use as sort of an advanced time-saving thing. No, it could be anything. It could be anything. But the only reason you would want to do this is with getchar. You wouldn't want to do it for any other reason. So this is a pretty specific pattern that you would only ever really want to write this when you're using getchar. Any questions about that? Nope. Okay. So the final thing that we were going to mess with was, oh, and I might compile this just so I can prove to you that it works. Oh, nope. DCC ASDF. Yep, and it works. And I can even press Control-D to finish it up. Awesome. So let's now move on to fgets. So when do we use fgets? What's fgets useful for? Can anyone tell me in chat? Lisa says putting a whole string into a char array. And Patrick says the same thing. I agree. The trick here is it's a whole line, right? So it's reading in everything up to and probably including a \n. So let's take a look at this in the simplest case. The first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to change this so it says hash define size to be 100. Now I'm doing this because it's good style to have the size of an array like this hash defined. In the exam, pretty much always, you'll get told, well, at least when you're expected to use fgets, you'll be told how long the thing is that you're scanning in. You'll be told something like, you are guaranteed you'll never have more than 2048 characters. And that's a good hint. Oh, okay, I know that I can set my size to be 2050 and it'll all work. So here we go. We're going to say str size. Now we can use fgets str size std. Now let's go through this. Fgets takes 3 arguments. The first argument is the string that you're scanning into. The second argument is how big that string is. So this is the maximum size. And this third argument is the file which, well, so it's technically the file which you're scanning in from. In our case, it will always be stdin, because you're always scanning in from stdin in this course. Now what we can do is we can printf scanned in %s str. And so we'll just look at this really quickly. Try again. And we're going to look at fgets. Now we get a prompt, so we're going to be able to type in a line. I like COMP1511. And there you go, scans in a line. Any questions about that? I'll stop and give people a second to poll. How are we feeling? Alrighty. So if anyone there who's not sure about something, feel free to post in chat if there's anything in particular that's not making sense. Otherwise, if it's more of a general everything not making sense, we can probably have another chat at the end, I'd say. But is there anything in particular people are confused about that doesn't make sense here? So I've defined a string. Yeah, of course. Okay, so we'll step through this. This here is creating a string. We're creating a char array, really. So it's an array of characters. Fgets is going to take in an entire line from my input and write it into str. So fgets will, let's say I type in ABCD, it will write ABCD into str. Now, fgets takes 3 arguments. The first one is the name of the string it's scanning into. The second one is how big that string is. So this is kind of a maximum size for what we can scan in. And this third one is always stdin. And you can kind of ignore it. We just always write stdin. And then we're going to printf scanned in %s, which is str. So this is just going to print out scanned in and then whatever we scanned in. Does that make sense, Fishak? Or is there anything there that's not clear or not sure about? It's still in the scanf input. That's a bit of a weird question to answer. Oh, stdin is the scanf input. Yes. So the only way that you can get command line inputs is with argc and argv. But scanf is reads from the same place that fgets does. What do you mean by can you ever use getchar for not input? I'm not sure I understand that question. As in like you want to get a character from an array. So the simple answer is not easily. That's not something you'd really want to do. It's technically, theoretically possible, but it's not something you'd want to be able to do. So whenever you're dealing with arrays, you should just use the indexing into an array, like square brackets I, rather than trying to use getchar. Is that okay? Cool. Alrighty. So we've scanned in a line. The other thing which I said I wanted to do was print out the line's length. That might be useful. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say int len equals 0, while stir len not equal to \0 len plus plus. Now this is a bit of a weird while loop because I'm actually not going to have a body here at all. I'm just going to say len equals 0 while stir len not equal to \0 len plus plus. And what this is saying is just keep counting len plus plus, len plus plus, len plus plus until stir square brackets len is not equal to \0. Until it's equal to \0. In other words, until len is the index of the \0. Any questions about that? Jeff. Any questions? How are we doing? Let's run this code. Oh. So to Vishak's question, can you use for loops? I hate to answer this way, but if you have to ask, then the answer is no. Is it allowed? Like, can you physically do it? Yes. There's no penalty for it. But would I recommend it? And would I say, yes, you should do it? If you're wondering about whether to use them, I wouldn't use them. For loops are a concept that you'll learn later on in probably 2521. And they're a concept that lots of programmers like to use, but we don't teach them in 1511. And so if you're not sure or you're not confident about something, I wouldn't recommend them. For break, you can use break, but you should be really careful about using break because it can make your code messy. So often what will happen is a student will use break and think, oh, I've made my life easier because I've used break. But then half an hour later, they're trying to debug their code and they realize this break has actually messed with my code. Does that answer your question, Vishak? So in summary, can you use them? Yes. Should you use them? Be careful. Okay. Bodhi, what about stirlen stir? We absolutely could use stirlen. The only reason I'm doing this is because it's kind of more fun to write our own function, and particularly when I'm trying to demonstrate this to you all, it's useful to write it this way. But you could replace this with stirlen. You could just say stirlen of stir. Absolutely right. I'll just write that in. Same as stirlen stir. Now, one thing I wanted to look at here quickly before I get to James's question. It's a good question though, James. We'll compile. String revision fgets. If I type in A, B, C, D, E, F, G, we scan in this thing, which is 8 long. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Hold on. Have I done something wrong here? I scanned in 7 characters, but it's saying that it's 8 long. Why might that be happening? Space, good question. It's not quite the space, but Mohammed and Patrick are right. It's because of the new line. So fgets scans up to and including the new line. So this is me basically saying, just be careful. Whenever you're using fgets, you probably want to be saying something like stir len not equal to 0 and stir len not equal to \n. So that's a good thing to be careful of. If I now recompile my program, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, now it says 7. Okay? Any questions about that or anything there that doesn't really make sense? Stirlen should return 8, I believe, because stirlen just counts up until the \0. So this is another reason why you might want to write your own stirlen, is if you were searching for a character other than \0. Maybe you're looking for a space, or maybe you're looking for a new line. You might want to write your own function to do that. Well, your own piece of code. Okay? James, I'll answer your question quickly. The reason why they are banned is because they cause really significant problems and make your code really bad. And there is no reason in 1511 why you should use them. So what do I mean by that? Why do they cause significant problems? Anytime that you're writing code that you're using global variables, there are a few things that happen.
First of all, if you're writing code that's run concurrently, so in other courses you'll do this, not in 1511, but in operating systems, global variables will cause you pain. They will just break. Separately, one of the things about functions that's really nice is that mostly, if you have a function and you give it the same input, it'll give you the same output. So if I give a function called add 1 and 2, no matter what, it will always give me back 1 and 2. Global variables, though, mean that possibly you call the same function twice and it does a different thing. So that's something that can cause a lot of pain. The other reason as well is just because they can make your code really hard to read, because now the behavior of your program depends on some global constant that might change at any point. And if I give you a function, you can only understand that function if you've read the whole code. Whereas without global variables, you don't need the whole piece of code to understand that function. So that's why they're banned. Does that kind of give you an answer to your question, James? Sure. Alrighty. So look, that's everything I wanted to really go over in detail. That's all three ways that you can get strings. So you can get them with fgets, with getchar, and with argv. Are there any particular things that people wanted me to cover? Anything that maybe a question that you've wanted to ask about that? Anything at all? I'll give people a moment for that. Otherwise, what I'll do is I'll go through maybe one more question, and then we'll finish a bit early. But if there's a particular thing that you want me to cover, let me know in chat and I can do that. If there is something you'd like me to cover, press yes, just so I know to wait for you to answer. If there's nothing in particular, just press no. I'll wait for the people who've said yes to post their questions then. Two people who've said yes that they had a question, but nobody's posted yet. While people are forming their questions in their mind, I might choose a question to do this as some revision. Let's do... was there a forum post about char star versus char brackets? Excellent point. I will DM Andrew right after this, and I will ask him whether he posted it. I don't know if there was one. The other thing you can do is if you make a post on the forum, either Shrey or someone else will link you to it, or I'll get Andrew to reply to you. Is that okay? I'm so sorry about that. I remember you asked about this in the lecture, if I recall. Cool. Yeah, maybe what would be good is, if you post that question in the forum, we can direct it to Andrew. There was another question, I think, from Zihan. Did you have a question? String truncation. Oof, that's a good question. In fact, let's make that the exercise that we do. It's a great question. Include stdio.h int main void. No, I'm not using any argv stuff here. I'm just doing void. Let's make this problem. Take in a string and replace and print it out without the last word. That's what we're going to do. So, for instance, if I print out hello, if I type in hello world, it will print out hello. Okay? Is that a reasonable question? And hopefully this will show you string truncation. Zihan, there are revision sessions tomorrow about linked list stuff, so it's probably better to ask a question there. Though if we've got time at the end, I might be able to answer it. Is that okay? Cool. And yeah, for those of you, I'm assuming because you saw the note about these sessions, you'll know that tomorrow there are sessions, but there are two sessions tomorrow, one on like navigating a linked list and one on inserting and deleting from a linked list. So if those are things that you want to learn about, they'll be recorded like this one is being, but also you can watch them live. Should be that the navigation one is at 1 p.m. and the insertion and deletion is at 3 p.m. Okay, so what we're going to do here, we're going to do the same thing again. Well, let's say that the question said you'll never get a string that's bigger than 2048 characters. How to remove the last word, middle word, random word, first word. I will try and do some of those things, Vishak. So stir size, and then we're going to fgets into stir size and std. So once again, we're fgetsing a line. So how might we do this? There are a few approaches we could take. The simplest approach is to realize the following. This string, let's say that we scan in the string hello world. That's actually the string hello world \n\0. Now, if I wanted to print out this string without the last word, what I could do is I could end the string here rather than ending it at the end of the line. Can anyone tell me, how do I make a string end somewhere other than the end of the line? Or end it earlier than what it is currently? What do I need to insert here? Yeah, a \0. So if I could put a \0 in this point in the string, I'd be home free. And I'd have cut off the last thing in my string. Or last word, sorry. So what we could do is we could say last space equals 0, let's say. And what this is talking about is this is the last place where we found a space. And then we could say while, what we'll also do is we'll have an int I. So we'll say int I equals 0, while stir I is not equal to 0, not equal to \0, plus plus. So all we've done here is we've said, well, we're going to make a while loop that's going to go through each character, but we're also now keeping track of this thing called last space. And originally, it points to here, so the first letter. Here's my plan. As I go through the string, I'm going to keep looking. I'll say, is this a space? No. How about this? No. How about this? How about this? When we get to a new space, we're going to update last space. So now we're going to say, hey, the last space was at this point. And then we can keep going. And eventually, we'll end up where we go, RLD \n\0. And at that point, last space will be the index of the last space in the string. Any questions about that? Does everyone understand the plan here? We're all good? Okay. So what I might do now is I'll say, okay, if stir I is equal to a space, then the last space that we saw equals I. Okay, so whenever we get up to a new space, we'll say, well, that's the last space that we saw. We keep going. Once we're at the end of the linked list, once we're at the end of the string, once we're at the end of the string, what do we need to change about our string? What did we say that we were going to change? Post in chat. Yeah, we're going to add a \0 at the last space. So what we'll say is something like stir last space equals \0. Perfect. And now we can do something like, I didn't get all of that. I heard %s. And then we can say stir. So let's have a look at this in practice. dcc-o strings, strings.c, /strings. Nope, strings.
Hello world, my name is Tom. I didn't get all of that. I heard, hello world, my name is... Let's try it again. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. They only heard A, B, C, D, E, F. Okay, so what we're seeing here is we can get rid of the last part of a string by saying last space, or whatever the point at which you want to end the string is, and setting it to be equal to \0. Any questions about that? And Vishak, does that kind of give you a hint as to where to go? Awesome. Great. The last thing I might mention, actually there are two more things I want to mention before we finish up. The first one is this code only happens once. Let's chuck it in a while loop really quickly. So while something, I want to do all of this stuff. Let's say that what I want to do is I want to do this as long as there's a string on standard input. So I want to keep doing this as long as someone types line. Now, we saw earlier, I could probably do something like, well, we'll do an fgets up here, and then we'll do an fgets down the bottom. But how can you tell whether an fgets received any input or whether it was just Control-D? Anyone know? What does fgets return if it doesn't get any input? Yeah, it returns null. Exactly right. So I can even write something like while fgets blah 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 not equal to null. And now, hopefully, this will continue working. Let's try it again. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And it says, oh, I only had A, B, C, D, E, F. Hello, 1511. And there we go. So now it will keep working until we press Control-D. And when we press Control-D, well, then fgets returns null, and this loop ends. Any questions about that, or anything there that doesn't really make sense? Is it a valid way? Yes. Is it a way that we've taught you? No. So I'd be careful about using it unless you're really sure that that's what you want. But yes, you can use it to do that. Does that help? Cool. Okay. The last thing which I will mention is just so that for your information, I'll open up this 21T2. Now, these have been available for the last day or so. We'll post a notice about them probably tomorrow morning, just because we didn't want to distract people from the weekly tests. Hopefully you all know that the weekly test is due at 8 p.m. tonight. It's a really good way of practicing for the exam. So I would definitely recommend jump on that weekly test and get it done. Even if you don't need the marks for anything, it's a great one to do because it gives you that practice for the exam. We do also have these revision questions though. So if you're looking for more stuff to revise about strings, you click on the strings button, and then there's a bunch of exercises here about read line, string length. So we've already written that one. Char index, we kind of wrote that one. Show letters, show terminated letters, string copy, string to upper, string to lower, more and more and more, string reverse, all this sort of stuff. So if you're looking for something to sink your teeth into, if you really feel like I need more strings practice, there's a bunch of good exercises here, and you can even run auto tests on them. So if you want to auto test your code, you can definitely do that here. Where's the prac exam? You can find the prac exam under the week 10 weekly test, week 10 lab. exercises, prac exam, and there's a link here. The prac exam is now nominally over, but if you submit extra questions at this point, I'm really not going to be annoyed. Don't save, definitely. So yeah, it was due last night, but if you get it done today, we'll probably still accept it, to be honest. I mean, this is a practice exam. Like our intent here is to make sure that everyone has a chance to practice. So if you submit it a bit late, I can't guarantee, but I imagine that we'll still accept your submission. Does that answer your question, Mohan? Are the answers out? Not yet, I don't think. Except as in like give you marks for it. I'm going to imagine we will give you marks for it. Are the answers out? Oh, even better. Yes, there are some answers out. What will happen? So we haven't released the 3 answers for the regular tests. What will happen is probably sometime tomorrow, because unfortunately I'm normally the one who manages all of this, but it was unfortunately timed that I got my vaccine yesterday, so I'm a bit dead today. But tomorrow morning, I'll probably move the data that we've got for the practice exam back into here, so it's like a regular regular lab, and we'll let you see the answers for that. We'll let you auto test regularly for that. So can you still run auto tests for it? Yes, you can. But you may not get marks for it by next week. For the short answers, the spaces don't matter. We will almost certainly strip all the spaces out. If there's a situation where we don't strip the spaces, where the spaces are important, we'll be really clear about it. But I can't think of a situation like that. So you can leave. It's kind of nicer if you leave the spaces in. You can have like triple brackets, space, answer, space, close brackets. But whatever works best for you. Okay. That's the end of what I plan to present to you all today. If there are any other questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. Otherwise, otherwise I suppose we're finished. Anything else that people want me to cover? Anything else that I can talk about? Nope. Ready? I might stop recording then.